Hey guys, welcome back to the studio. This week marks another installment of Guitar Fundamentals. And in case you're unfamiliar, in this series I cover topics that I think are fundamental to becoming a better improviser on the guitar. Check the link down in the description to watch the previous episodes where I take you through all sorts of other fundamental concepts from scales, arpeggios, chords, and beyond. In this episode, we're going to be talking strictly about bebop articulation. This is a concept that mostly gets talked about by horn players and the like, but I think there's a lot we as guitarists can learn from it. Today, I'll be taking you guys through my approach to bebop articulation on the guitar. We'll talk about what it is and how we can use it to sound more like our favorite horn players and really start making our swing feel sound more natural, especially at higher tempos. You guys ready? Let's get into it. Articulation is really just how we play a particular note. In the context of a jazz solo, what we're really talking about is the difference between articulated, in our case that means plucked, notes, and slurred notes. This combination of slurring and articulated playing can be thought of as bebop articulation. Since what we're really doing here is emulating what horn players do with different tonguing techniques, we should start by listening to the progenitor of all this stuff. Who else would that be but the legendary Charlie Parker? Check out this short passage from his solo on a bootleg recording of Cherokee from 1942. Now see if you can clock where he's putting the accents in his lines and where he's choosing to slur from one note to the next. We'll be returning to this recording a little later on in the video, but for now, let's see how we can emulate this sound on the guitar. It's not perfect, mind you, and there's a lot of other ways to accomplish this, but here's my general approach. I combine plucked and slurred notes in patterns to get the accents in the right place, like a horn player would. Let's take a look at using a G7 scale as an example, and we'll put one extra half step between the root and the seventh to turn it into the bebop dominant scale. Take a look. The goal here is to emulate what saxophonists do, but the guitar being what it is, we don't always have the luxury of being able to do this perfectly. So we have to combine actual slurs with variances in pick attack to get the sound that we want. In this example, you can see there's quite a few ways we can go about doing this. As a general rule, I try to slur into the last note that I'll play on any particular string. I started out by plucking the first note and then slurring into the upbeat. But then to keep things from feeling awkward, I plucked the first two notes on the next string and then slurred into the last one, which just happened to land on a downbeat. Then it's back on track, plucking the first note with an up pick and slurring into the F natural that comes next. In order to keep things from feeling weird again, I decided to pluck all these notes but just vary my pick attack so that the accents will land up in the right places. When I started coming back down the scale, I went back to using the rule I described earlier, where I slur into the last note on each string like this. Check out how that all sounds one more time. I don't know about you guys, but I think that sounds a lot more authentic to the bebop style than if we'd just use straight up alternate picking. It can feel a little awkward at first, but I think you'll eventually find that lines are going to start fitting really neatly into this kind of a technique. Next, let's check out how we can apply this technique to run through a whole major scale. In this section, I'll show you an exercise that I really enjoy doing to work on this technique. The idea here is to play through a sequence all the way through the major scale. As far as the technique goes, I'm going to slur into the last note on whatever string I'm playing. To keep the structure more or less the same throughout, we'll have to come up with some funny fingerings in some cases, but I think you'll find that this way of playing can lead to a much more natural sounding swing feel. Check out the exercise ascending first. Descending will move the sequence down through the scale without changing its structure. Take a look at what that sounds like. We should, of course, practice going through our bigger scale patterns using this technique as well. Take this standard major scale pattern, for example. Again, I'm just slurring into the last note on each string. This works out like this. When I have 2 notes on a string, I'll play pick, slur. 3 notes on a string gives me pick, pick, slur. As far as picking direction, I try to still keep things alternating and feeling smooth, but of course, in the heat of the moment when improvising, it doesn't always work out so perfectly. Next, let's see how this technique can be adapted to scale-based lines that make use of some added half steps. When we start adding extra half steps into our lines, things can start to get a little funny. We won't always be able to make the slurs happen exactly where we have been with complete consistency. We'll even need to start using a little bit of economy picking here and there to help disguise some pick notes and make things blend together a little bit more. In this next exercise, we'll run through a C major scale with this rule. We'll play 2 half steps up to the 3rd, and then from there go up the triad to get to the 7th. Then we'll come down the scale with 4 half steps between 5 and 4, 4 and 3, 3 and 2, and 2 and 1. The challenge here is going to be keeping the contour of the line as it regards the articulation mostly the same while we run this rule through the whole key. Check out how that works. For today's last item, let's head back to that Charlie Parker solo and see how we can apply this technique to some of his licks. Like I mentioned earlier, when we apply a technique like this to an actual improvisation or a transcription like we'll do in a second, it's not always going to work out perfectly. In this example, we end up using a fair bit of economy picking as well as the articulations we learned in the previous sections in order to make this stuff work on the guitar. Have a look at how I chose to handle the A section to Bird's first chorus of solo on this recording of Cherokee. Thanks so much for watching all the way to the end of the video. I hope I've been able to shed some light on how to make your 8th note lines swing and play a little easier. Make sure to let me know down in the comments what you thought of today's lesson. Don't forget that the guitar is a strange beast and we shouldn't rely on just one technique to the exclusion of all others. Instead, try to think of this as just another thing that you can add to your arsenal. My best advice is to really have your alternate picking down super strong and then work on incorporating techniques like this to help smooth out your lines. As always, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and hit that bell for notifications too. If you're looking for more practice material on this technique, the PDF from today's lesson that's available over at my Patreon has quite a few more examples and exercises for you to practice articulations on. You can also find the entire catalog of written material from every video here on the channel there as well. A huge thanks goes out to my incredible patrons: PH, Josh, David Zuckerbrun, Patrick Caron, David Nickel, Max Irwin, Everton Armstrong, Jay Jarek, Bill Jacob, Stephen Schwartz, and Jazz Luminaire patron Bebop Babadi. Thank you guys so much for being a part of the studio. A big thank you to all of you for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.